that's where it started.
Hello, this is Paul.
This is Laura.
And I'm Alton.
We are Team Derringer.
And you are listening to Derringer Discoveries,
where we take you, the listener, on an adventure.
a music adventure.
Today's episode is Julian Taylor, Troubadour from Toronto.
Yeah, I like that.
With over 100,000 monthly listeners on 3 different Spotify pages, Julian Taylor has been part of the musical fabric and landscape in Canada for over 2 decades.
Listeners, Julian Taylor is with us live today. He said he's just come off the road and is home for a few days. Julian, I assume that's Toronto, Ontario?
Yeah, it's Toronto. It's Toronto. It's home.
So, Julian, in 2020, you had a breakthrough year with your second album titled The Ridge. You would receive some nominations from the Canadian Folk Music Awards, and you won Solo Artist of the Year. Very impressive. So tell us how many categories you were nominated for, and tell our listeners about the experience of these nominations and winning Solo Artist of the Year.
Well, 2 Canadian Folk Music Awards, 2 Juno Awards, which is like the equivalent of the Grammys here in Canada. The Polaris Prize, which is the equivalent of like what the Mercury Music Prize would be in England. 5 Native American Music Awards, which they call the NAMMYs, which is the Grammys for Native American music. A couple of Canadian Music Week Independent Awards, a Summer Solstice Award nomination. And then the next record was nominated for Juno and also for a Canadian Folk Music Award and a Canadian Music Award and a Country Music Award for Roots Artist of the Year.
It's amazing.
That next record was 2022, right? Beyond the Reservoir?
Yeah, I think that's it. It was interesting. For me, it was sort of like an interesting time to be nominated for awards because I'd always wished for that. And it hadn't really happened. I'd had a couple here and there in the past, but it was sort of a floodgate. And it was interesting because every single one of those nominations I had to either accept or go to the ceremonies on a computer screen, which was interesting to me. I found it very funny that I wasn't able to attend any of them in person because of the pandemic. But
the pandemic made it remote.
Remember that? Yeah,
yes, I do.
It's impossible to go to any award shows, but thank God it didn't make it impossible to get nominated for any of them.
Yeah,
it's a great honor.
Yeah, so that's a really impressive list of awards. Is there any one in particular that's especially near and dear to your heart?
Yeah, being nominated for 2 contemporary Indigenous music awards at the Junos is extremely near and dear to my heart because obviously I don't look Indigenous and I'm not completely of Indigenous blood. I'm mixed, and for them to recognize that particular side of me and recognize me in a whole, the community at large and the Indigenous music community is a great, great honor. It would have made my grandfather so proud if he had been alive to see that happen.
He was a big supporter of your music?
He was just a big supporter.
You are listening to Derringer Discoveries.
With listeners in more than 30 countries.
It was mornings like these when the breeze whistled through the trees. Fall would hover and the grass would still be wet.
Listeners, in this episode, we will celebrate Julian Taylor, a storytelling troubadour from Toronto, and, as we just heard, an award-winning folk singer, musician, band leader, and songwriter.
Derringer Discoveries listeners, if you're already one of Julian's fans, we are so glad you've tuned in. If you're just now experiencing Julian Taylor's music for the first time, hang on. By the end of this episode, you're going to be a fan too.
Listeners, stay with us as we count down our top 5 favorite songs by Julian Taylor so far.
It's raining, I'm staring outside my window.
Throughout this episode, whenever we talk about a song by Julian Taylor or any of his projects or bands, we will play snippets of that song.
Julian, before we reveal our top 5 favorite songs so far by you, we want to ask you a little bit about your rock band from the 2000s called Staggered Crossing, or as your fans called it, StagX.
Sure, what do you want to ask?
When the rain's all gone, you'll be standing by a rainbow. You'll be looking at me, and I'll be looking at you.
Well, when was it formed?
The band was formed in 1994.
Okay. And StagX got signed to Warner Music Canada. Can you tell us about that?
We were signed to Warner Music Canada, I believe it would have been 1999. I would have been 19 years old at the time.
Wow.
So would have some of my friends. It was one of those moments which you dream of, where, you know, I ended up quitting school halfway through the year to sign that record deal, even though my parents didn't want me to. And we went on tour with a couple bands. Nickelback was one, Big Sugar was another. Spirit of the West was the one that we really became good friends with.
I got a phone call on Tuesday morning.
And not to say that we didn't become good friends with the other ones, I'm just saying they really took us under their wings. And what an experience it was. That was just before Napster hit as well. So we came in at a time where I think that the last real record deals were being signed.
Heading out of old San Francisco, heading by the Golden Gate Bridge.
Unfortunately, when we put the record out in 2000, it didn't do quite as well as we had hoped. We had like a big #1 hit on the rock charts here. Actually went to number 4. So it
was that Further Again?
Further Again, yeah.
I'm going further again.
And then I remember weeks later, the entire industry had changed. People lost their jobs and there were no promo people anymore. And it was just because of the time. And we got lost in that shuffle. Wonderful lesson, though, because we ended up doing a record with Jay Bennett from Wilco before his untimely death. And he was a really good friend. We did our second record with him. And he and I hung out a lot and had a lot of great experiences. And then I produced the next record with some of the band guys and a friend. And that's when I started our own independent record label and sort of worked the phones myself and got us back into the top 20, and we got to tour again. And then it just got too hard, you know, for all of us to keep going.
You are listening to Derringer Discoveries.
With listeners in more than 30 countries.
Hey, how's it going? I'm Julian Taylor from Toronto, Canada. I am a recording artist and live touring musician, and I've enjoyed listening to Derringer Discoveries.
I'm on my own.
Julian, today we're focused on your solo career, but you're also the leader of a band aptly named Julian Taylor Band. When did the Julian Taylor Band form, and how does it balance with your solo career?
They're one and the same thing, really. I mean, yeah.
So have the bandmates that have been touring with you been with you a good while?
Oh, most of the people I've played with have been with me for a long while. Ever since Staggered Crossing imploded, I've played with many of the same people off and on. There's never been sort of a set bunch of people. It's just who's around and who wants to hang out and play.
Don't stop believing in yourself. I know you. You've been through some high times.
Are there any members of the Julian Taylor Band who are in StagX?
Oh, yeah. Jeremy's been around for most of it, the drummer. Jeremy and I have played together for 25 years.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Love it.
So, Julian, we know that you're the main singer and you also play guitar. Do you play any other instruments in the band?
I try. I play piano.
When you're writing your music, do you also have the guitar in your lap and go back and forth working out the music between the piano and the guitar?
Sometimes, if I need to write a horn line, I'll write it on the piano.
Listeners, now on to the countdown.
Oh, I'm so excited.
Are you really? All right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Listeners, we're excited too. We're going to cover our top 5 favorite songs by Julian Taylor so far. Paul, why don't you get us started?
Now you are, you're in full flower.
Derringer Discovery's pick number 5.
Julian, for our top 5 favorite songs by you so far,
Okay.
we believe that you are the sole songwriter of at least 4 of the 5. I believe
Wow.
the 5th is a co-write.
Okay.
But when we go through this, if we're wrong, just identify who co-wrote it with you. But otherwise, we have you listed as being the sole writer of 4 of the 5. And as I mentioned, the 5th is a co-write.
Yeah, Paul's been known to be wrong before.
Occasionally.
Just once or twice.
That's incredibly surprising. I don't know anybody who's ever been wrong.
We're putting together a lot of information, and I try to make it accurate, but it doesn't always happen. Team Derringer pick number 5 by Julian Taylor is a song called Seeds. That's Seeds, Seeds, from this year, 2023.
Now here you are, you're in full flower. You're flexible in all your power. You got all the sunlight in the air that you need.
Our listeners voted Seeds to number 3 on the Turn Up Music Radio TMR Top 25 chart for August 2023. It's on the chart and playlist. Seeds is interesting because it is a co-write. As I mentioned, the other songs are solo songs. The other songs were written by Julian Taylor by himself, but this one he identifies as a co-write with Robert Priest. Julian, am I saying his last name right? And was it a co-write?
Yeah, you're right.
Okay.
Yeah.
And tell me your connection with Robert Priest.
I met Robert when I was 18 years old, and when I first signed my publishing deal with Staggered Crossing, Robert was one of the writers at this independent music publisher called The Music Publisher. Acronym was TMP. TMP was entrusted in finding Staggered Crossing a major record deal within a year's time. Otherwise, they would lose the publishing deal with us. When I signed the publishing deal, they wanted me as a writer, but I walked in and I said I wouldn't go without my friend. So they signed everyone in the band as a writer. Robert was there, and Robert and I have been close friends ever since. So it's been 25 years that Robert and I have been hanging out, and Robert's been really kind to me because not only did he help write some of the songs I've written, but usually what I do, he's a poet and a wonderful poet at that, and a confidant. I'll send him things that I've written just to get his take on it. It's kind of like Reichel and Letters to a Young Poet. I get to send my work to a laureate that is far more experienced than I am, and he writes back to me all the time. So in a lot of cases, sometimes even our co-writes aren't really co-writes. He'll change a few lines here and there. He'll bring something to my attention that I haven't thought of. In the terms of the way that Seeds came together, I had sent him a message after receiving a text from my cousin. You know, it was after Kamloops announced that there were 215 unmarked graves there in the schoolyard at residential school that they found there. And it was around the time that George Floyd was suffocated. And we were feeling pretty low as Black Indians. And as anybody, you don't have to be any denomination to feel low about that. It's just horrendous. But she sent me a text that just said, they tried to bury us, but they didn't know that we were seeds.
They tried to bury us, but they didn't know we were seeds.
I didn't know that at the time it was a saying. A Greek philosopher was the first one to say it. And I wrote that over to Robert Priest, and he said he was meditating one day and just had a whole bunch of these ideas, and he threw them at me. And I saw what he had written, and I took that and I deconstructed the whole thing. And from basically scratch, I took his words, took my words, took my cousin's words, and scrambled together the song that you know, Seeds.
The version that made our top 25 was a duet that you did with Carson Gray.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah, and tell us about your connection with Carson Gray.
Well, Carson lives in Haida, which is just off the coast of BC. I met her there. No, where did I meet her? Oh, the Chan Center in Vancouver, when we were doing something for Truth and Reconciliation. Her and her husband, Joey Styles, who's a rapper, we got to chatting, and I just thought that, you know, the original version of Seeds, I love it. I think it's great. One of the things that I find with my music a lot of the time is that I get buried by the music a little bit. So I thought, why don't I take it down and cut it down to its bare bones? And her voice was so childlike. I found it fascinating because of the tonality in her voice did sound like, I don't know, and when you listen to it, even though she's a grown woman, she does have a childlike innocence to her voice that really I felt brought forward the message of the song.
Listeners, that's Team Derringer pick number 5, Seeds.
They tried to bury us, but they didn't know we were seeds.
And the version that made it to the chart is the one featuring Carson Gray. When you check out Julian Taylor's catalog, you will hear that he has at least 2 other versions of Seeds, and all 3 versions are fantastic. Seeds by Julian Taylor featuring Carson Gray. Laura, you have pick number 4.
Come on, Laura, let's go.
Derringer Discoveries pick number 4.
Team Derringer pick number 4 is Ballad of a Young Troubadour, written solely by Julian Taylor. This song is from Julian's 2020 breakout second solo album entitled The Ridge.
I left T.O. quite some time ago, sometime in the spring, with just a knapsack and a 6-string. I'd made this deal.
This generated the 3 previously noted nominations at the Canadian Folk Music Awards, and which led to Julian winning Solo Artist of the Year. Ballad of a Young Troubadour has received an amazing 7.1 million streams.
Yeah.
Still going strong on Spotify.
Yeah.
Julian, we want to know all things about Ballad of a Young Troubadour.
Okay. Ballad of a Young Troubadour is a song that was written in a night, sitting here actually in my space that I'm at now. I have this attic space. A friend of mine, Roseanne Barker Thornley, who I've written a few songs with as well, had this idea called the Acoustic Guitar Project, which is something that goes around the United States and Canada, where a songwriter gets an acoustic guitar for a week and then has to sign it, write a song, and then send it to the next songwriter. And they have to do the same, and it keeps on passing around. The guitar is almost a troubadour in itself, really. And just like anybody, I left the song to the last minute and had a night to write it. And I didn't know what I was going to write about. But when I was 17 years old, I had this agreement with my mom and dad because I loved playing music and acoustic guitar. And I was busking on the streets here in Toronto at the time. You know, in between, actually not even in between classes. I didn't even go to the classes. I just would busk.
We won't tell anybody.
Yeah, well, they know.
Yeah, I think you're a kindred spirit on that.
We call it being enrolled but not attending.
Yeah, they know already, so it's all good. But I wanted to go try my hand at doing it in the United States. So I made a deal with my mom and dad that if I could get out west to where my grandparents lived in Maple Ridge, that they'd help me get home. But I worked for the first little while that summer and saved some money up and bought a train ticket, went down to Brooklyn where my cousins and my aunt was living there, and started busking in Washington Square Park, actually in New York City. That's where I started off. I actually slept on a park bench. I was in New York City not too long ago with my daughter, and I showed her the bench that I used to sleep on. I used to take the blue bicycle wire that you used to lock your bike with and wrap myself around on the guitar and through the bench and lock myself up on there.
So the guitar wouldn't get lifted from you? Is that the idea?
Yeah, exactly. But people are cool in Washington Square Park. Washington Square Park's pretty tame in a lot of ways. I mean, there's lots of things that can go wrong anywhere, but people are pretty cool down there. The university's down that way and whatnot. And
yeah,
people are pretty bohemian-like and pretty cool about things. And then ended up through the northern United States. I wasn't allowed to go to the southern United States. My parents just wouldn't allow it.
Each time you put it all along the northwest, with no knowledge in my chest of ways and means and schemes.
But made my way to Chicago and across Wisconsin and all the way over to Seattle.
By the time I hit Seattle, I arrived by train.
And then that's most of that song. And then the other part of that song is when I did it again and hung out with my bandmates when we were finally on the road and, that's pretty much what that song's about. It really is about my journeys in music and trying to find my way.
You are listening to Derringer Discoveries, a music adventure podcast.
Listeners, that's Team Derringer pick number 4, Ballad of a Young Troubadour by today's special guest, Julian Taylor. Alton, you have pick number 3.
Derringer Discoveries pick number 3.
Team Derringer pick number 3 is the title track from Julian's second solo album, The Ridge, from 2020.
Oh, wow.
The song was written solely by Julian Taylor. Am I right, Julian?
It was.
Julian, would you tell us about your song, The Ridge?
Yeah, The Ridge is a short form for Maple Ridge, British Columbia. And I used to spend...
Is that where you grew up?
Kinda. I was born in Toronto, but my grandfather and my step-grandmother had a place in Maple Ridge. When we were growing up, I was out there the first time when I was a baby, really. I think I don't know, couldn't have been more than 18 months old when I took my first steps out there in the kitchen.
She taught me how to write. She used to sing me lullabies. She watched me take my first steps in the kitchen when I was a kid.
It was a wonderful property. The first property they had, there was the Alouette River that ran through the back of their yard, and the salmon would spawn, and you could see the salmon go there. My grandfather would go fishing there and take me sometimes. And the second property they had wasn't too far away from there. It was about a quarter mile from there, where they had a barn at a chicken coop down there, and so we would go there, my sister and I, and sometimes my cousins would come out and whatnot, not as often. But we just had this magical, it was like, you know, like the bridge to Terabithia in a way for us, you know, it's like a really special place.
And those were the early years where we were taught to have no fear. And everything seemed so clear.
And it's sort of the place where I go when I need to feel like if I'm running away from myself, I need to find myself home. I just close my eyes and go there. So the song for me is really important. I think time travel is real. I mean, all you have to do is close your eyes.
I'd fall over out the front door, down the path with the brushes past the palms. My sister and I used to catch frogs there, until the house sold and we had to move on. Now there's a westbound wind blowing through the ridge again. You can go in and stay outside, wait for it to die, but either way, it never ends. It never ends. It never ends.
Ви слухаєте Derringer Discoveries, подкаст музичних пригод.
And that was a snippet of The Ridge by Julian Taylor from his 2020 album, aptly named The Ridge.
I'm so curious what the last two are.
Yeah, well, Paul's going to tell us number 2.
We're keeping you in suspense, Julian.
Derringer Discoveries pick number 2.
Team Derringer pick number 2 is Opening the Sky. Julian, tell us about Opening the Sky.
Oh, wow. That's pick number 2.
That is. It's a good song.
Oh, man. It's not even a song, but thank you. It's a letter to my daughter. I was in a pretty bad car accident. My grandfather had given me this 1966 Mustang when he died. And it was my prized possession for a little while until I crashed it. I crashed it pretty bad. The car's gone. I'm still here.
We're glad you are.
Yeah.
Yeah, me too. I like it here.
And I can recall everything that's ever happened to me. When I take my last breath and I finally go to sleep. Remember what I taught you.
I crawled out the passenger side window. The ambulance and the fire trucks and everything had come there, and they just said, "Man, somebody's looking out for you. You're very lucky to be alive." And I agree. I mean, I had bruises. Like the next couple of days, I went to the hospital, got out of the hospital that night, and bruises all over my body. Like I guess I was in bed for a couple of days, and was able to sort of pull my wits about me. And I just was so distraught and embarrassed and torn up about what I had done, and was driving too fast. I was coming around a corner and just joyriding, I guess. And life can be taken away from you so easily. So. And
you wrote the letter to your daughter after the accident?
I want to be here for all the little things, and that was sort of what I was trying to say within Opening the Sky. Opening the Sky was the translation of my grandfather's Mohawk name, and Light Bright Snow was the translation of my daughter's Mohawk name, Joserata, and those two things are prevalent within that song. But really, it was just a letter that I had written when I woke up one morning and just scratched it on a piece of paper.
Man your manners. Always say please, but don't bow down to nobody. Bloom where you planted and don't take anything for granted. Good things don't come easy, don't expect that they do. The wind will guide you.
I didn't intend to write it as a song at all. And if you can tell, like, there is no chorus to the song. There's no real form to the song either. Anybody who has ever played it with me has no idea what's going on. They have to really follow the lyric to understand where the song's going. And anybody who listens to the song, if you follow the lyric, the way that the melody and the way that the chord progression follows suit, it follows whatever I'm saying to a T. If you don't know the lyric, if you can't sing the lyric, you'd never be able to play the song.
Listeners, that's Team Derringer pick number 2, Opening the Sky, by today's special guest, Julian Taylor. That takes us to the number 1 spot. Laura, what do we have at number 1?
Derringer Discovery's pick number 1.
One night in Georgia, outside of Macon while the rain came down.
Paul, Team Derringer pick number 1 was voted onto the Top 25 October 2023 chart and playlist by our listeners. Can we get a Derringer Discoveries drum roll, please? Our pick number 1 is Georgia Moon from 2023. There you go.
Wow. Okay.
So, Julian, before you tell us all about this song, we note that there's an earlier version of this song on your debut solo album from 2017 titled Absence of the Sun. Here's a snippet of the earlier version.
Drove a 65 Chevy Impala, heading north on the I-95.
And here's the version released in 2023 and voted by our listeners onto the Top 25.
He drove a 65 Chevy Impala, headed north on the I-95.
Julian, we've got to know more about this song.
I wrote the song when I was 19 years old, before we even put a record out. It was dubbed at the time not commercial enough for what we were doing.
No kidding.
And that's what the record company had said to us. And so it did not even appear on the first record, but it was slated for that first record. The acoustic version that you hear on Absence of the Sun is simply a record that I sat in and just was going over demos. They're just demos that I had done a long time ago. And so as I'm getting ready to release my anthology volume 1 after being in this for 25 years, I thought, what the hell? Let's go try it out. So a couple of friends and I went in and went over the song and came up with a definitive version, I believe. Staggered Crossing has a live version of this song, which is a rockier sort of version. Maybe if I played that version, it would make sense as to why it was dubbed uncommercial, because it was 6 minutes long. It was a jam. It was kind of like, how would I explain it? It's like basically if the Grateful Dead and the Replacements had a baby.
Yeah. Yep.
So I shortened the version down from the big jam, because there was a big jammy part where, it was interesting because the song's it's a fictitious story that I wrote when I was 19 years old about a murder and, basically a chase down the eastern seaboard.
Detective Stephen was a clever running free.
So I'm glad people like it as much as they do. I'm so shocked.
Listeners, that's our top pick, Georgia Moon, the 2023 version by today's very special guest, Julian Taylor.
Listeners, thank you for joining us today with our special guest, Julian Taylor of Toronto, Canada. This has been Derringer Discoveries, a music adventure podcast.
For the songs by Julian Taylor featured in this episode, all copyrights Julian Taylor or as otherwise designated by Julian Taylor.
Listeners, thanks so much for joining us today. You can find more about this episode with Julian Taylor on our website, derringerdiscoveries.com. You can also find more about Julian Taylor on his website, juliantaylormusic.ca. You can also find us on social media. We're Derringer Discoveries on Facebook, Derringer Pod on Instagram and Threads, and X, formerly known as Twitter. Please click the follow button wherever you listen to podcasts so you never miss a Derringer Discoveries episode.
In your sister's room. That's where it started. In your sister's room.
If you don't know the lyric, if you can't sing the lyric, you'd never be able to play the song.
Do you perform this song live?
I do, mostly by myself.
Is that the one where the band says, "Yeah, I think we'll take a break now"?
Yeah, some people, the band that I hired and made friends with in the UK, they seem to get it really well, so we did it a couple times.
Can we get a Derringer Discoveries drum roll, please?
Yes, let's pipe in that drum roll. We'll just have Alton channel it in during the mixing.
There you go. You got to give us some information on your tour dates because I am super excited that Derringer Discoveries is allowing me an unlimited budget to travel the world seeing live music.
Oh, wonderful, Laura. Yeah.
I know, it's
well, then
great.
Come see us on December 6th at Massey Hall in Toronto.
I would love to.
Yeah, we'd love to have you. We'll put you on the guest list, no problem.
Carry me home, but I will never